It's okay. We'll work it out. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's episode of Paranormal Encyclopedia. Bear with me a moment while I post links, and then we'll get this party started. There you go. Brian's going to jangle something to keep you entertained. It is, after all, one of the reasons we keep him around. Not the only reason, but one of them. Okay, there's one. There's Facebook. Go post it here. And there's the other. Posted. Excellent. So, again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and anyone else who happens to be tuning in at the moment. My name is Kevin Mears. I am a demonologist, paranormal investigator, and the Paranormal Encyclopedia. I am joined this evening by the lovely and talented...
the Demon Lord Brian McKinley, author and general paranormal skeptic.
And vampire nerd.
Yes. Vampire enthusiast.
So clearly you are the Demon Lord of vampires.
Yeah, probably. Or vampire fanboys.
I was trying to give you a little more
very specific. I have a very specific domain.
Now I wonder if there is a Demon Lord of vampires. I'm certain there's one in like Dungeons and Dragons, but like in actual folklore. Is there a demon particularly associated with vampires?
Yeah. No.
I know we talked once before about the saint that's the patron saint of vampires.
Yeah. In some folklore, vampires are created by a demon taking up residence in a human body and animating it. But
which is how this all relates to what we're talking about tonight,
yes.
Funny enough.
Ha. Master of the segue.
Tonight is not an episode about vampires. It's an episode about demonic possession. And demonic repossession, which is, we are told by at least one meme, what happens when you don't pay your exorcism bill. You get repossessed.
Remember, possession is 9/10 of the law.
True, but that's not supposed to be this case. I will start out by pointing out that yes, you can become repossessed. But if your exorcist is charging you money, they're a bad exorcist. Which is that pedantic little part of me that every time I see that meme, I want to respond, but wait! But difficult though this may be to believe, I occasionally understand that the jokes are a thing.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the logical segue to 2 weeks ago when we talked about that disgusting nonsense about autistic people being possessed and how that isn't true. So, what does it mean to be possessed? Who is possessed? How can you tell? The first thing to understand about actual demonic possession is it's rare. The majority of people who think they're possessed need to be on some form of medication. Even within the smaller percentage of people that actually have a demonic problem, it's usually not possession. Possession is not quite, but almost the end goal of all forms of demonic activity. But you don't, except for very unusual circumstances, you don't start at possession. And if you start at possession, you probably did something incredibly stupid. Like satanic ritual. And before, because I've had people complain about this before, in this instance, when I talk about satanic ritual, I mean actual devil worship, Satanism, not Anton LaVey, not the Satanic Temple. The first use of Satanism is in the 19th century, and he meant devil worship. So I continue to use it to mean devil worship. It wasn't until Anton LaVey in the 60s or 70s that it got turned into this idea of basically hedonism. Or then later morphed into the temple, which is a whole other thing. But again, I am drifting away from topic to go into personal rant. The first critical thing to realize to understand actual possession is it requires consent. People don't become possessed because it's a day ending in Y. People don't become possessed because they aren't Christian, just because they're not Christian, or just because they did the evil thing. Mentally ill people are not typically possessed. Is to say you can't be both possessed and mentally ill, but mental illness is a side of mental illness, not demonic possession. Demonic possession is almost kind of a deal with the devil of this external demonic being asking to enter your body and you giving consent. It doesn't have to play nice. It doesn't have to play fair. And often it gets you to say yes by torturing you until you do. But there is still a fundamental element of possession, of agreement and free will involved here, which is one of the biggest reasons that possession really isn't that common. Most people who hear a voice asking them that would probably seek professional help and would say no, not say yes. Which again is there's a really let's we said possession, but I feel like I need to roll the clock back a little to explain what I'm dancing around at the moment. Demonic attack occurs in what's generally agreed to be 5 stages, or 4 stages, or 3 stages, depending on whether you count the first and last stage as stages. I do, so I say 5. The first stage is called grounds, which is when the demon gets permission to start screwing around with your life. Most grounds occur through one of 2 methods. Invitation, where you start playing around with black magic rituals, Ouija boards, and the dark side of the occult, and you actively ask for a spirit to enter your life. The other one is attraction, which is a very simple concept that people that do horrible and evil things draw horrible and evil spirits. Child molesters, rapists, serial killers, mass murderers are like beacons to demonic spirits. And being such an awful, evil, immoral person is another way of saying yes. And hey, Lisa, for truth, long time no see. There are other ways that it can happen. A person laid under a curse occasionally will have demonic activity in their life. A person who moves into a home where grounds has already been given in some way, like you move into the perfect example of this is they into a horror house. Lawrence family moves into a house where an entire family was brutally murdered. They didn't need to do anything to invite the spirits in. They were already there. Now, there's a lot of speculation about how did the spirits get there to begin with, because of course, DeFeo's conflicting claims of having spirits influence or guide him in the murders. And the short answer is, I have no idea what came before to bring them in. But the murders by themselves is more than enough to wind up with demonic activity in the house. From there, it moves into infestation, which is the plot of most haunted house movies. You hear footsteps, you hear voices, objects get thrown around the room, things will disappear. Occasionally things will appear, which is called an apport. You may get blood running down the walls. And hey, Teresa Hall, welcome to you as well. You may get slime, you may get beer, you may, in one very interesting case, they got V8 juice. Which makes vastly more sense when you understand that the father of the family, whose house was dripping V8 juice, had an anaphylaxis level allergy to tomato products. So it wasn't just because demons love V8 juice. There was a logic to it.
they they were short on blood at the demonic supermarket that day.
But I don't think isn't the traditional blood substitute Caro syrup dyed red?
Well, that's what they use in movies, or at least they used to
That's
famously.
particularly Sam Raimi used it in movies all the time.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's got its foothold and it's starting to work at terrifying people, at divide. If there's a family present, trying to divide them, get them to not trust each other, get them isolated, and it's looking for its target. Most of the time, it's if it was invited into the house, its target's going to be the person who did the invitation. Not always, but the majority of the time. But it's going to look for somebody vulnerable. I hate to say this, and this is not because women are weak. I'll explain why it is in a minute. But historically, women have been primary targets for this next stage. The reason is very simple. Historically, the man went to work, the woman stayed home to watch children, clean house, make food, which means mom is now alone in the home, especially if the kids are going off to school, for hours at a time. And despite popular myth, hauntings of all types, both demonic and ghostly, can happen during the day. So the spirit has unfiltered access to her when no one else is around. That now in the modern world, where women are going in the workplace more and aren't the ones stuck at home, that's changing. Because again, it's not that women are weak; it's that women historically were the ones that were home alone all the time and therefore the easier target. It's harder to go chasing the guy who's in the office 9 to 5 every day. But it's eventually going to move into the next stage, which is what we call oppression or obsession, which is the one that most people confuse for possession, which is where the person starts to hear voices, activity starts to focus on them, and the demon starts to really try to torture them with the goal of getting them to say the big yes. And this is why it looks a lot. As it gets later, is where it starts to look like possession, because the demon has a great deal of control and influence over them, can speak through them. But there's this difference of an oppression and obsession. It's a demon sitting on your shoulder, like the old cartoon. Possession means one that's actually moved into your body completely and now can control the show from the inside. The other, and another big part of why consent is key, even with the damned, is in the name possession. The demon now has a spiritual claim on your body and your soul. Now, the very fair question that relates to the topic 2 weeks ago is, how do you tell possession apart from mental illness? Now, a legitimate exorcist from the Catholic Church, Episcopalian, or Orthodox are going to say, okay, step one is go see a psychiatrist. Go see a medical doctor. Let's rule out natural explanations for what's going on. Because you pretty close to universal rule, demon possession does not respond to medication. If the bizarre and erratic behavior improves because the person has been put on medication, they're not possessed. That does not mean that if the medication doesn't work, they are possessed. It's not that simple. But it does work the one way, that if medication works, you know for sure it isn't possession. The other consideration is, in possession or oppression or infestation, the demon is eventually going to reveal itself. And it's going to do something that falls outside of the boundaries of psychology. You can explain sudden traumatic personality changes psychologically. You can explain the what's what I'm looking for? The presentation, for lack of a better word, of a new separate and distinct personality, dissociative identity disorder. with psychology. A 12-year-old girl with no education on the subject suddenly speaking fluent Aramaic? Someone who can look at a dresser, a big dresser sitting against the wall and cause it to fly across the room without touching it? Unless there's wires involved, we've officially left the realm of psychology. Does this mean that demons can't hide and not perform? They are not, after all, trained circus dogs. They can, but there's two things working against them. One, the point of having an investigator like me get involved is there's ways to force them out and make them do something to reveal themselves. Two, they're creatures of pride. They're going to want to show off. This isn't to say I don't think there are any borderline cases, but I think it's very rare, and I'm always inclined to side with mental health professionals over supernatural explanations, barring something overtly unnatural.
It's probably a good move.
Yeah. Do you have any questions so far, or anything you would like to add?
Well, nothing to add because we have discussed some of this, but I can ask a couple of questions for the benefit of the audience. I guess, what are some of the symptoms or things that you would see that would, aside from dressers flying about on their own and the overtly stuff, like what would you expect to see in an actual case of possession?
There are 4 traditional signs of demonic possession that are laid out in the Ritual Romanum, which is a 17th century text the Catholic Church has used that gives you the ritual of exorcism, baptism, and a number of other rituals that in turn got updated in the 2000-ish. But most exorcists use the original ritual. And the 4 symptoms it recognizes are the ability to speak a foreign or particularly a dead language that the person doesn't know, like the example I gave of a child who suddenly can speak in Aramaic. There's a case I was involved with, though I wasn't there for this event, where a woman who wasn't of that ethnic background and had no training or reason to know it suddenly learned how to gain the ability to speak Serbo-Croatian. But usually they're dead languages, usually they're biblical or languages or something like that hasn't been used in a couple hundred years that nobody outside of a couple of scholars know how to understand, which is why we wind up recording whatever they're saying and then going to a linguist and going, what the heck is this? Is this an actual language? Is this gobbledygook? Because, of course, mentally ill people are perfectly capable of what's known as glossalia, which is the ability to babble on what sounds like a language that essentially is not.
Right.
The next sign is that they have knowledge they shouldn't have. Father Joe, the exorcist I worked with before he passed away, always had a tradition that was kind of funny to watch. He's an ordained priest. He was an educated guy who had gone to college. He usually showed up for a case in paint-splattered overalls that looked like something maybe a farmer or a handyman would wear. And we'd refer to him as Joe, or maybe Joseph. We wouldn't call him. We wouldn't mention bringing a priest. We wouldn't mention that he was a priest or call him father or anything like that. The idea was, and I never had this happen myself, but other people I've spoken with have. If a person is possessed, they'll look at him and go, "Hello, Father." They might know specific details of another exorcism he was involved in, like the other day or something to that effect. They'll know, and this is like not publicly available information, but they'll know things that they shouldn't know. As my mentor Lou would put it, don't go if you want somebody who will tell you freaky things that they have business knowing. Don't go to a psychic. Find someone who's possessed. Because all those dirty little secrets you have, those things you don't want people to know, they know. The one protection against this is that things that have been confessed under the seal of confessional are out. Nothing like that's ever been revealed during during an encounter with the demonic. Not saying that would be a proof that it wasn't demonic, but it is an interesting tidbit from what I know. So the third example, which is one of the diciest, because mentally ill people, well, actually about everybody under the right circumstances can do this, which is feats of incredible strength. There's an example in a case of a man by the name of Maurice Thuriel, who was on a tractor. When I say a tractor, I don't mean those little small guys, John Deere makes. I mean the really big commercial farming tractors that blew a flat. He was able to pick it up off the ground and hold it there while the tire was changed. Moving stuff that pushes.
Admittedly a little handy.
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't recognize this by itself as proof of mental illness and proof of demonic possession, because again, people do ridiculous things under adrenaline. The famous stories of women lifting cars off of their kid, things like that. And as I understand it, we are capable of feats of strength much higher than we realize in general. It's just, it does damage your system, and if you do too many of them, you'll get hurt. And I think looking, there's some stuff I want to get into that's being talked about in the comments, but I'll come back to this in a second. Or might not be what I think it is, but makes me think of a good thing to talk about. But before I do, the fourth traditional sign is that they despise blessed objects. Relics of saints, holy water, crosses. This is, again, dicey because lots of people have issues with religious symbology without being demonically possessed. But there's a famous scene in the movie The Exorcist where he throws holy water on Reagan, and she freaks and she says it's burning, when in reality he just threw tap water on. You wouldn't do it so obviously because the possessed person knows to react. It might know that you're bluffing. But that general idea is sound. Just telling, it's not just the perception of it being holy water. The demon will know, even if they shouldn't know. And I'm going to use this as an example because Father Joe would, but do not try this at home. Seriously, do not try this at home. Sometimes an exorcist will mix a little bit of holy water in with food or with a glass of water and offer or have someone else offer the food or water to the person. And if they're possessed, at the very least, they're not going to accept it. More likely, they're going to freak out. Even if they didn't see it built in there, the person who brought it to them doesn't know it's there, they'll know, they'll lose their minds. And there's ways to use that to test. The thing is, when I say they're going to lose their minds, I mean they're going to lose their minds. They can get violent. And if you think you can handle that, see point 3. So, looking at it, I think you were talking about something else, but Trent reminded me of another common misconception. Not just about possession, but about Christian theology. One that even some Christians make. The devil doesn't make people do things. The devil made me do it as a BS excuse. Yes, a person who is actually possessed, the demon can and may, and there are cases where this seems to have happened, cause a person to commit a murder or some other horrible violent crime. That said, the overwhelming majority of people who do evil, immoral things do it because they're evil, immoral people. The way there's really two ways in Christian theology, in proper Christian theology, there's two ways that demons interact with us. There is ordinary demonic activity, and then there is extraordinary demonic activity. Possession and infestation and oppression and all of that is extraordinary demonic activity. It's very rare. Most people listening to this will never experience it. Even in my case, I've only seen true demonic possession a handful of times. Most of the time, it's something lower down the food chain. Ordinary demonic activity is much more common. And the easiest way to explain this, silly as it seems again, is the old cartoon stereotype of the angel and the demon sitting on your shoulder. Just like we all have that voice that we call the conscience, saying to do the right thing even though when we don't want to. I think most of us have experienced the other side of that equation. The little voice that's like, go ahead and do it. Nobody will get hurt and it'll be funny. Nobody will miss it if you don't give the guy the right change back and just put it in your pocket. You're not being made to do anything. It's that little voice telling you to do something you know you shouldn't. And the majority of the time, that voice is part of your own psyche. There are traditionally three types of temptation in the world that affect us. There is the temptation of the flesh, which is we want pleasure, and sometimes we're willing to do unethical things to do it, to get it. There's the temptations of the world, which is some immoral things are sexy. Some or easier ways, at least appear to be easier ways to get money. And then the third type is demonic temptation, which is what we're talking about. And again, this is not boogity boogity occult powers type of thing. And frankly, all the things you do to combat ordinary demonic activity work pretty well on negative thoughts in general. Meditation, prayer, if you're into that kind of thing. Listening to positive music. Things that help you. Things that uplift you. And you know what? You don't need if this is this doesn't require a priest to get involved. This is something we all struggle with, and I think even the atheists among us can agree, we all struggle with negative thoughts, whether you believe it's supernatural or not. And learning how to cope and how to deal with that is an important part of life. And that's really what the ordinary is about. And again, what most people experience, if it's demonic at all, and there's a case to be made that it isn't. But again, the devil doesn't make people do things. And this is an important point, I feel, too, about the idea of attraction I talked about when I talked about grounds. Because it's another very common mistake that people make, which is the idea that Hitler was possessed by the devil. That's why he killed so many people. This is wrong. First, if Hitler was possessed, and I'm inclined to think that he was, it wasn't the devil. The devil wasn't nearly as stupid. The devil is not as stupid as Hitler is. Or was, I should say, since he's gone on to whatever awaited him, and I don't think he's happy. And two, if I'm correct, and if he was possessed, being possessed is not why he committed the crimes that he committed. The crimes that he committed are why he became possessed. It's a punishment for his wrongdoing, not a cause. What is that, Brian?
It's my phone.
Can you mute it or something?
Yeah, trying the person's just being persistent, not
Oh,
getting the hint that
like we're
now
the
is not the
show
time I'm
people.
wanting to talk.
So, do you have any other questions for them, or anybody in the chat have a question?
Yeah, let's see if anybody in the chat has anything.
We've got 5 people listening live at the moment,
Oh, well, that's something.
including a bunch of familiar faces. Amisha was in here. I'm not sure if she still is. Our good friends Lisa for Truth and Teresa Hall are both here, and I'm really happy to see both of you. Trying to think. Really, at the moment, I'm just trying to think of other. I mean, there's certainly the case to be made for Hitler's possession because of. I mean, there are people that knew him that described that there are times he'd talk like and it sounded like it was a different person speaking. And again, like I said, and it goes for serial killers too. There are a number of them that were really fucked up and showed interests in the occult and things like that. But again, they're not, if demon possession was a recognized medical phenomenon, the way that mental illness is, it would just the side of never be a legitimate defense in court. Because again, no. You got yourself this way by being a horrible person. It's always something I feel the need to be clear about when I talk about this, just because a lot of people, including a lot of Christians, misunderstand this and try to use it as as an excuse for the terrible things people do. And that's missing the idea. And how about you, Brian? Any questions? Nobody in the chat seems to have one.
Okay. Well, like I said, we got onto misconceptions. That was one thing. I guess let's go with the fun stuff. Movies. all of the many movies that have portrayed exorcisms and demonic possession. Go ahead and talk about them. Which ones are more accurate as you believe, or less?
One of the most accurate, believe it or not, is the original Exorcist. Keep in mind that when they made that movie, 2 Jesuit priests served as technical advisors.
Yeah.
It is extreme to see all of the things that happened in that single movie happen in a single case would be unheard of. But with the exception of the head twisting around like an owl, everything you see in that movie has happened during cases of demonic possession. It's just a little more spread out. And that said, the Roland Doe case, which is what The Exorcist was based on, was a pretty extreme example. There's an excellent book, An Encounter with Evil, that you can find on Amazon that goes over what really happened to an exhaustive degree, and I would highly recommend it. By a guy by the name of Stephen LaChance. Lost track of him over the years, but I did have him on the show way back in the early days. And he was a very good guest. And the other movies that do it well. Another good example, which has something that to most people who know about exorcism would call it wrong, but actually it's correct, is the first of the Conjuring movies. In the first Conjuring movie, that's very typical of demonic activity. There are things that are not true to the original case. For example, the mother, case in point, related to our topic, the mother being possessed did happen in the case, but it didn't happen after it had already happened by the point the Warrens got involved, due to a seance that they had conducted. It wasn't something that happened during the investigation.
Hmm.
Now, the part of the movie that a lot of people see as inaccurate, and in most cases they would be right, is that Ed Warren, who was not a priest, winds up performing the exorcism. That is in the very specific circumstances the movie lays out, where it's becoming increasingly apparent that the priest is there's no priest close enough to do the ritual, and to get her out of the house, to get her to a priest, she's gonna die before she gets there. Yes, that is the one with Bathsheba, Lisa for truth. In that very specific circumstance where it's a matter of life or death, a lay person who knows what they're doing, and Ed absolutely would have qualified, could perform an exorcism. Did it happen in that case? The Warrens say no. The family says no. I'm inclined to think no. Could it happen in a similar circumstances? I have it from actual exorcists that yes, it can. But again, that's a pretty extreme example. I'm trying to think of other movie examples.
Well, I've heard about the trial of Emily Rose.
The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Yeah, The Exorcist. That's right. Yeah, sorry.
Which is a really interesting example. The movie does a pretty good job of laying out demonic possession. There is a problem, and it is very much a problem with the actual exorcism of the woman Anneliese Michel, who was a German college student who the story was based on. Of that, she had suffered from epileptic seizures, epileptic or grand mal, I'm not certain, but she suffered from seizures. She was supposed to be taking medication for seizures.
Well, yeah, I can address that. Grand mal is just a type of seizure. It's the most powerful type of seizure. The epilepsy is what causes the seizure. So it would all be epileptic.
I think there's some question of whether or not it was epilepsy or something else, because epilepsy isn't the only thing that causes seizures, I believe.
Yeah, no, there are like brain disorders and things that can also cause seizures.
But at any rate, she had stopped taking the medications, which was part of what led to the tragic death. That's not the only problem. The other problem is that she had stopped eating and stopped taking in liquids. And yeah, dehydration and fasting to too far an extent will kill you. The thing here is there's a lot of question of whether or not Anneliese Michel was actually possessed. I personally haven't done enough research into the actual case myself to have a solid opinion. I can say that Father Joe had done the research and was inclined to believe that she was not. I can also tell you that the priests that were put on trial and held and ultimately found responsible along with her parents claimed, and actual Catholic doctrine on the subject confirms, that one, they would not have denied her psychiatric medications because that won't help. Someone can be possessed and still have mental illnesses. And if you get rid of the demon, they're still going to have mental illnesses and neurological disorders and seizures and things like that. So ignoring the one to treat the possession is a terrible idea. The other one is again, by Catholic standards and the claims of the priests, they didn't deny her food. They didn't deny her liquids. She stopped eating, and they couldn't get her to eat. Fasting is considered an important part of the process of exorcism. In the Bible, Jesus said that this kind can only be cast out by prayer and fasting. The critical thing here is the priest is the one who does the fasting, not the victim. The victim physically, mentally, and spiritually is in the fight of their life. They need their strength. You don't deny them food. Also, ideally, in all possible cases, both in the Catholic Church and in general, it is infinitely more preferable to have a medical doctor present and a psychiatrist, ideally as well. Because if again, they're in the fight of their life, you don't want them having a heart attack from stress. And if something happens, you want a medical professional there who can intercede for very practical and real reasons.
Yeah.
I will say, from what I understand, my own mentor, to some extent, was a technical advisor on the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is one of the reasons they got so many details right. There's another movie I could name, but I'm inclined not to because it's not a good movie, which is An Exorcism of Evil, which is starring me. But it's not a really good movie. If you want to, you can find it on Amazon fairly inexpensive. And if you watch it and go, what the hell did I watch? Why did I pay any money for this? Remember, I told you not to buy it or rent it. So don't blame me. A lot of other movies I can think of rapidly turn into bad fiction. Or just... It's hard to think of good... It's hard to think of good examples of movies that deal with the demonic, and it's hard to think of bad... It actually isn't that easy to think of bad examples because there's so many.
Yeah.
I will say I'm very curious to see they are working on one final Conjuring movie, which is supposed to be based on as I understand it, is going to be on the case of Maurice Theriault, who was a French-Canadian national living in Massachusetts. And that actual case was crazy. That's what I was talking about with lifting the farming tractor with his bare hands. It's one of the worst cases of demonic possession on record. And it actually ultimately killed him. Which is, remember I said there are 5 stages, but I only mentioned 4. Destroying the person is the last stage. Driving them into a mental hospital, getting them to commit suicide, ruining that person, getting them left homeless on the streets, muttering to themselves, getting that person's life completely destroyed is the ultimate goal of possession. There's a line in the movie The Exorcist that puts it very well. It is very much drawn from actual cases of demonic possession, where the priest asks the demon how long it will remain in the girl, and it says, until she lies rotting and stinking in the earth. But again, most of this is not likely to happen to anybody listening to the show. There are a lot of people that panic. A lot of Christians in particular that like to panic and babble nonsense about the situation of possession. It's not that common. Aside from the fact, as stupid as this is, it needs to be said. Aside from how mind-bogglingly stupid it is to say that autistic people are demonically possessed, being gay or transgender is not a sign of demonic possession either. And the idea is idiotically nonsensical. I've never made a secret on the show of the fact that I am pro-LGBT. I never will make a secret of the fact that I'm pro-LGBT. But again, theologically speaking, even if someone believes that being part of the LGBT community is sinful, it's not. But for the sake of argument, even if you believe that,
right,
saying that it's because they're demonically possessed is saying they have no accountability for their choices. That isn't how it works. Greg Locke, at least from Truth puts it perfectly. Some people believe that, like Greg Locke. There are times I wonder if Greg Locke isn't possessed. The man is absolutely vile. But again, bad, quote unquote, in this case, because being LGBT does not make you a bad person, but quote unquote bad behavior is a response, is the product of choice, not a demon making you do something. And reality check being LGBT is a, being gay is a question of attraction, not behavior. If you're attracted only to your own gender, you're a homosexual. That doesn't mean you have sex with your own gender. Just like there are straight people who are celibate. I'm not saying people should be, gay people should be celibate. That's a personal choice. Our motto here is the same as the BDSM community: keep it safe, keep it sane, keep it consensual. Beyond that, it's not my business. Be happy. But it is not a sign of demonic possession.
Yeah.
It is not caused by demonic possession. And as a helpful hint, I've watched a number of Greg Locke's videos. In my professional opinion, that man has never met a demon in his life. Unless he is, in fact, possessed by one.
That would
be this is the same crazy person who started insisting that there were witches in his church, and he knew there were witches in his church, and the name of the witches in his church, because the demon he was performing an exorcism over mentioned the name of the witches in his church. It's like, if other than the likely event that Greg Locke ever sees or hears this, Greg, if you need me to explain to you how stupid it is to take witch accusations from a literal demon, get out of it's like, just in general, get out of the preaching game. Yeah. But really get out of the preaching game.
Clearly an unimpeachable source.
Yeah. And he makes a lot of other dumb claims about it. Like he's also a big one who's very insistent that most mental illnesses are demonic possession. He thinks he can go in, if they let him into a psych hospital, he could cure a whole bunch of people overnight. Oh, yeah. Teresa Hall made also an excellent point of, she hopes, and I hope with her, that he doesn't burn books again. Because, he burns. He's a book burner.
Yeah, of course he is.
Well, there was the funny situation of he held the book burning, and a member of the Satanic Temple showed up and threw a Bible on the pyre. Now, I believe in freedom of expression. I believe that if you own a book and legally it is your right to do with it more or less what you want. But I do not approve of the symbology of burning books. Its precedent is bad. I think we can all agree on that, and I think the world would be a better place if people didn't burn books. But I have to admit, I find burning the Bible funny. Hey, Brian, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It seems like my computer froze. But it may just be... I don't think that's necessarily a problem.
I think it was on your end. I didn't notice anything.
I'm not sure if the stream is still going to YouTube or not is the main problem. Because that's where I particularly saw it freeze.
Oh.
Oh, in fact, it closed YouTube. That's strange.
Oh. Well, that's bad. I was going to say we didn't get the little announcement. So.
Yeah, we should still be streaming.
Okay.
But okay. Hopefully I didn't get disconnected there, folks. Computer decided to go
close to the wrap up anyway.
True, but maybe my computer got possessed. Well, funny enough, but it is, I suppose, worth pointing out. Objects can't be possessed. They can be inhabited, but they can't be possessed. The reason they can't be possessed is possession is about possessing the soul. Objects generally I don't believe objects have souls. There are certainly religions of people that would disagree with me on the subject. But a computer doesn't have a soul, so it can't actually properly be possessed. It can be inhabited by a demon, which is effectively the same thing. It's me being pedantic because this is what I do for my life.
So, what do you think about cursed objects then? Supposedly, like can objects carry
Oh
magical
yes,
energies?
yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
That's definitely a topic worthy of its own net show, I think, though.
Okay.
But the short version is yes, cursed objects are a thing. Um, that reminds me, and I'm going to do a little shout out here that was not requested, but I think they deserve it. So my fiance Amisha and I attended Trapdoor, which is an escape room company. They have a bunch of sites here in Jersey and at least one or two in Pennsylvania. It was actually a lot of fun. If you're in the New Jersey, PA,
Oh, well, that one we definitely lost.